Subscribe to keep it terrifying for creepy tales, horror, and nightmares you won't forget. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and keep it terrifying.
Blackout, Part 1, The Flicker. The hum of the power lines was Gary Mullen's favorite sound. It meant the world was still running, homes glowing, stoves heating, people alive in their boxes of light. He worked as an electrician for the city of Fairbridge, a small industrial sprawl surrounded by endless woods. At 42, with a stomach shaped like a coiled cable reel and hands calloused from decades of work, Gary didn't believe much in ghosts or bad omens. Circuits failed, fuses blew, everything could be fixed with the right tool. But lately, something about the power grid was wrong. For the past week, he'd been getting reports from all over the city, lights flickering, appliances humming when unplugged, televisions whispering static patterns that looked too much like faces. Overload, his supervisor said. The system's just old. Gary wasn't so sure. He'd walked into substations that felt off. The air inside them seemed charged, not just with electricity but with presence, as if something were standing just behind him, breathing slow and deep through the cables. Then came the night of November 5th. It started as an ordinary shift. Gary was alone in his truck, driving along the east perimeter of town, where the old factories lay dark and abandoned. His radio sputtered. Station 7, response please, static, then silence. He frowned, tapping the dial. Nothing but a low hiss, like someone whispering directly into his ear. He parked near the junction box beside the cracked asphalt of Logan Street. The streetlights blinked erratically, each one winking out in sequence down the road, until only the one above him remained, humming weakly, pale as a dying candle. He looked up, muttering, "Great, another transformer about to blow." As he opened the junction box, his flashlight flickered. The circuits inside were fine. Voltage normal. But a faint vibration passed through the wires, almost like a heartbeat. He leaned in, listening, and swore he heard something moving inside the conduit. A dry scraping sound, then a whisper, impossibly low, "Gary." He dropped his screwdriver. He stared at the cables. They lay perfectly still. Stress, he told himself. You're hearing things, buddy. Still, he slammed the box shut harder than he meant to and got back into the truck. Then, without warning, the entire city went dark. Every streetlight, billboard, home, and factory, all of Fairbridge, plunged into total blackness. The truck's engine cut out, leaving him in dead silence. Only the faint red glow of his radio remained, pulsing like a heartbeat in sync with the wires he'd just heard whispering. A chill crawled down his neck. He reached for his phone. No signal. Even the emergency lines were dead. He stepped outside. The air smelled strange, metallic, thick, and wet, like ozone after lightning. From somewhere in the distance, deep within the city, came a single, rising hum. It wasn't mechanical. It was more like a choir, low and dissonant, made of countless overlapping voices. Then, the hum stopped, and something screamed. It wasn't human. It was high and animalistic, echoing through the empty streets. The sound carried through the dark like a blade, slicing through Gary's mind. He stumbled backward into his truck and slammed the door shut, heart pounding. The scream faded. Silence again. He sat there for what felt like hours, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the lights to return. But they never did. Fairbridge was swallowed by the dark, and Gary realized with sinking dread, he was the only electrician left on duty that night. And the city was calling for him. Blackout, Part 2, The Substation. Gary drove through the black city, headlights slicing through fog that hadn't been there before. His radio hissed occasionally, spitting out fragments of words. Breaker, North Grid, help, but they never lasted more than a second. Every intersection he passed was dark, silent. No cars, no people. It was like the entire population had vanished between one breath and the next. He knew he needed to reach the north substation. It was the central node of Fairbridge's power grid. If he could get the main circuits online, maybe the blackout would lift. Maybe. But something was wrong with the city's layout. He knew these streets like the back of his hand, yet he kept ending up in the same place, the intersection near the old railway bridge. Each turn, each detour brought him back there, headlights illuminating the same graffiti on the cracked concrete wall, "The light is hungry." By the third loop, his nerves were fraying. Must be the GPS, he muttered, though he hadn't used one in years. He forced himself to take a road that shouldn't have led anywhere, a service lane that once dead-ended at the old paper mill. The truck's tires crunched over broken glass and rusted metal. Fog swirled thick and heavy, and the deeper he went, the more it felt like the city was folding around him. Finally, the chain-link gates of the substation appeared through the haze, half torn open. The padlock was melted, not broken, melted, as if by intense heat. Gary stepped out cautiously, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The smell hit him first, a burnt, chemical stench laced with copper. Inside the yard, the transformers stood like giant metal sentinels, silent and cold. Not even the usual electric hum remained. He climbed the steps to the control shed. The door hung ajar, creaking softly in the wind, though there was no wind. Inside, every monitor was dead except one. A single screen glowed faintly green, showing static that pulsed in rhythmic waves. He leaned closer. The static began to shift, resolving into an image, the main downtown grid. But something was moving there, something large, gliding through the darkness like a shadow on four limbs. "Come on," he whispered, reaching for the keyboard. The power feed indicators were offline, yet there was a strange secondary signal running through the lines, energy moving where there shouldn't be any. Almost like the grid was alive. Then the monitor flickered again, and for a heartbeat, the screen showed a human face. It wasn't a person he knew. The image was distorted, pale, with eyes that glowed white through the static. Its mouth opened, too wide, and a thin, electronic voice came through the speakers, "You shouldn't have come." Gary stumbled back, hitting the doorframe. The image vanished, leaving only snow on the screen. Outside, the transformers began to hum. One by one, they came alive, vibrating with deep resonance. But instead of light returning to the city, the air grew darker, the blackness thickening like liquid shadow pouring upward into the sky. The humming became a low chant, echoing the same strange pattern he'd heard before. And under that sound, faint but growing clearer, was something like breathing. Gary bolted for the truck. As he ran, the ground beneath his boots throbbed, as if a massive current pulsed through the soil. Behind him, sparks erupted across the yard, bright veins of light twisting through the fog, forming shapes. For just a moment, they looked almost human, outlines of faces screaming silently, trapped in the current. He reached the gate, dove into the truck, and slammed the door shut. The lights on the dashboard flickered weakly to life, though he hadn't touched the key. Then, over the radio, came a voice. Not static this time, an actual voice, distorted but unmistakably familiar. "Gary, come to Central Control." He froze. That voice, it was his own. Blackout, Part 3, Central Control. Gary sat frozen in the truck cab, staring at the radio as his own voice bled through the static. "Come to Central Control, Gary, hurry, before it gets out." The sound wasn't a recording, it breathed. He could hear the soft rasp between words, the tremor of panic. It was him, but not him. A version of his voice stretched too thin, like it was coming from a place where air didn't exist. The dashboard lights dimmed again, pulsing in rhythm with the radio's hiss. He shut it off. The silence that followed was worse, thick and expectant. Somewhere out there, the substation transformers still hummed, deeper now, almost like the ground itself was murmuring. He started the engine. The truck coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. He didn't think. He just drove. Central Control was downtown, a reinforced building beneath City Hall that managed all the grid's main circuits. Normally, he'd need clearance to enter, but tonight there was no one left to stop him. The roads were empty, the world stripped of motion and sound. His headlights carved through the fog, revealing the faint outlines of abandoned cars, doors open, seats empty. Some still had headlights on, their beams swallowed by the mist after only a few feet. At one intersection, he stopped short. A man stood in the road. Gary's hand flew to the horn, but he didn't press it. The figure wasn't moving. He looked like one of the city maintenance crew, orange vest, helmet, tool belt slung low, but something was wrong with his posture. His arms hung limp, his head tilted backward too far, as if someone had broken his neck and then set him upright again. "Hey!" Gary shouted through the cracked window. "You okay?" The man didn't answer. Slowly, his body twitched, jerking once like a puppet string had been pulled. Then another movement, sudden, sharp, his head snapping down, facing Gary now. His mouth opened, and from it came the exact same voice that had called through the radio, "Come to Central Control." Gary hit the gas. The truck shot forward, swerving wide to avoid the figure, but as his headlights passed, the man wasn't there anymore. Just fog, rippling like disturbed water. He drove the rest of the way trembling, gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The city blurred around him, dark windows, unlit streets, that strange, invisible hum growing louder with each mile. It wasn't just sound anymore, it vibrated in his bones, syncing with his heartbeat. When he reached City Hall, the front doors were wide open. A faint, reddish glow leaked from the lobby, like emergency lights running on low power. Inside, the air felt charged, thick with static. The security desk was overturned, and the elevators were frozen on the ground floor, doors half shut. Gary took the stairs down to Central Control. Each step echoed too long, like the stairwell stretched farther than it should have. His flashlight beam stuttered across concrete walls covered in something dark. At first he thought it was soot, but as he looked closer, he saw it was writing. Long, looping words scrawled in black grease, "The light takes shape in the dark." He swallowed hard and kept moving. At the bottom of the stairs, he reached the heavy blast door to the control room. It was open. Beyond it, the entire room was glowing with faint blue light. The panels were alive, every monitor running on some unseen power. In the center of the room stood a figure, back turned, body trembling slightly. "Hello," Gary said, his voice cracking. The figure turned. It was him. Same jacket. Same boots. Same scar across the eyebrow from a job gone wrong years ago. But this Gary's face was pale, translucent, eyes like twin arcs of electric light. His lips parted in a smile that wasn't human. Finally, the echo said. "You kept the current flowing." Gary stumbled back, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. "What the hell are you?" The thing tilted its head, static crawling across its skin. "We were waiting for someone who could fix what broke." Then, as if a switch flipped somewhere unseen, the lights in the control room flared to blinding white, and the world around him began to melt. Blackout, Part 4, The Light Below. For a few seconds, Gary couldn't breathe. The white light swallowed everything, panels, floor, walls, until he floated in a void of brightness that had no source and no end. His skin prickled with pins of electricity, and the air buzzed with the sound of distant voices overlapping in whispers. He tried to shout, but no sound came. Even his heartbeat was gone. Then the light dimmed, condensing into streaks that bent downward, like rivers of energy pouring into a single hole beneath him. The concrete returned, the hum softened, and he found himself still in the control room, though it wasn't his anymore. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of blue light crawling through the concrete like living things. Cables slithered across the floor, moving as though they were breathing. At the center, the other Gary, the thing that looked like him, stood perfectly still, staring at the main control board. "Where are we?" Gary whispered. The duplicate's eyes glowed brighter. "In between. The current runs through everything, the city, the earth, you. But something woke inside the grid. Something old. Gary's voice trembled. You mean the blackout? No, the echo said softly. The blackout was its birth cry. Suddenly, the screens behind it flickered, showing images of the city. Fairbridge from above, its streets veins of blackness spreading out in branching, unnatural patterns. But within that dark, faint light moved, flowing under the streets like glowing blood. And wherever it touched, shapes were beginning to crawl out of shadow. He saw them emerging from doorways, from cracks in the pavement, human forms made entirely of darkness, twitching like puppets without strings. The thing wearing his face turned to him again. It's feeding. The more power you restore, the stronger it becomes. Gary's stomach twisted. Then what the hell do I do? Finish what you started, the echo replied, smiling. Pull the main breaker. Gary stared at the massive lever on the wall, the one that controlled the city's central line. Pulling it would sever the current completely, plunging every system into permanent shutdown. The city would die. But if he didn't, the hum grew louder. The walls shook. Somewhere above, he heard the faint, distant sound of screaming, dozens of voices crying out and then cutting off at once. He turned toward the echo. You're lying. Its grin widened. Am I? The floor beneath them cracked, a fissure spreading outward. From the gap rose a blinding light, not warm, but alive. It pulsed like a heartbeat, each throb sending waves of static across the room. The cables writhed, reaching upward like roots. Gary bolted for the door, but the metal slammed shut before he reached it. The echo's voice chased him, you belong to the circuit now. You kept it alive. It remembers your touch. Gary grabbed a wrench from the wall panel and swung it at the control board. Sparks exploded. The echo screamed, a shriek of feedback that tore through the air like glass breaking in his skull. The blue veins recoiled, and for a brief moment, the lights dimmed. He saw his chance. He sprinted to the breaker, grabbed the handle with both hands, and yanked. It didn't budge. The metal burned his palms, alive with current. He screamed and pulled again, muscles trembling. The light from the fissure below flared, rising like liquid fire, swallowing the echo in a burst of blinding glare. With one last heave, Gary wrenched the breaker down. Everything went black. He collapsed, gasping in total silence. The air was cold now, no hum, no vibration, no echo. Just stillness. He was alone in the dark. Then, from somewhere beneath the floor, came a faint whisper, a voice like static behind a wall, you can't turn off what's already inside you. And just before the darkness took him completely, Gary saw a faint blue glow seeping through the cracks of his own hands. Blackout, Part 5, The Return Current. When Gary woke, his mouth tasted of copper. He was lying on the cold concrete of the control room, surrounded by silence so heavy it pressed against his ears. For a long moment, he couldn't move. His limbs tingled, his thoughts drifted like dust. Then, as his senses returned, he realized something strange. The lights were still out, but he could see. A dim, blue sheen pulsed from beneath his skin, faint but steady, outlining the veins in his hands and arms like circuitry. He sat up too fast, dizziness rolling through him. The room was warped, the panels half melted, the walls sweating condensation that glowed faintly in the dark. The smell of burnt ozone hung thick in the air. He whispered, "What did I do?" No answer. Only a faint hum rising again from the floor. He looked around for an exit. The blast door was fused shut, twisted inward by heat. There was, however, a maintenance tunnel through the far wall, a narrow corridor that led beneath the building. He found the hatch half open, and the smell that came out was awful, rust, oil, and something like rot. Still, he crawled in. The tunnel sloped downward, tighter the farther he went. Pipes lined the ceiling, sweating black water. Somewhere behind the walls, current still moved, slow and pulsing, like a sleeping heart refusing to die. The blue light under his skin flickered with it. Sometimes he thought he heard footsteps behind him, echoing just out of sync with his own. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a large chamber beneath the city. He'd been there before, the grid hub, an old emergency junction that predated modern infrastructure. But now it looked changed. Cables hung like vines from the ceiling, pulsing faintly with light. Pools of oily liquid shimmered on the floor. In the center stood a tall column of glass and steel, the power core, humming faintly though it shouldn't have had any power left. As Gary approached, the surface of the glass flickered. Images began to form inside, faces, places, moments. He saw his own life replaying, quick flashes of childhood, his first day as an apprentice, the accident that left the scar above his brow. All of it distorted, pixelated, like the city itself was remembering him. Then he saw the people. Dozens of faces flickered through the light, citizens of Fairbridge, their eyes hollow, mouths moving in silent screams. The glow grew stronger, and Gary stumbled back as the column cracked open like an egg, spilling bright liquid energy onto the floor. From it, something crawled out. At first, it looked human, a man-shaped figure made of static and light. But the longer Gary looked, the less human it became. Its limbs were too long, its skin shifting like reflections in water, its face changing constantly, sometimes his, sometimes others. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once. We carried the current through your hands. You built the veins. You made us. Gary's voice shook. I was just fixing wires. Every spark was a prayer, the thing replied, stepping closer. And we answered. He backed away, slipping on the slick floor. You're what caused the blackout. No, it said. The blackout freed us. The current has no beginning or end. It only waits. Gary's pulse matched the hum in the air. His hands were glowing brighter now, veins of blue crawling up his arms. The energy from the creature was resonating with him, feeding through him. He tried to fight it, but his body responded to the rhythm instinctively, like a tuning fork meeting its pitch. You are the conduit, Gary, it whispered. You can bring the light back, or drown the world in dark. The glow around him flared, the walls trembling as power surged through the underground. For an instant, he saw the city above, streets illuminated by ghostly blue fire, people standing motionless, their eyes shining like coals. Then everything collapsed into light again, and Gary felt something vast and hungry reach through him, using his heartbeat as a door. Blackout, Part 6, The Signal. Gary's body convulsed as the light poured through him. It wasn't heat or pain, it was memory. Thousands of voices rushing in at once, like every electrical pulse that had ever passed through Fairbridge was whispering in his head. Names, screams, fragments of conversations long dead. He saw flashes of the city, people at their kitchen tables, flipping switches, turning on lights, each tiny act feeding something invisible that watched from behind the circuits. He stumbled backward, eyes burning white. The being of static loomed before him, its shape flickering. Its face alternated between every person he had ever known, his mother, his supervisor, the foreman who died in a substation accident years ago. All speaking in unison. The current remembers. It keeps the shape of every spark. Gary shouted, "What do you want from me?" The thing tilted its shifting head. To finish what you began. To let us through. A vibration deep in the chamber made the floor ripple. The cables hanging from the ceiling began to sway, their tips sparking. The energy running through them was no longer blue, it was red, like blood seen under a blacklight. Each pulse echoed with a deep tone that Gary felt in his ribs. He looked up, realizing the signal wasn't just here, it was spreading. Every wire, every circuit in the city was alive, thrumming in perfect unison. He could feel it calling to him, begging him to join. If I give you power, Gary said slowly, you'll destroy everything. The being smiled with every borrowed face. Not destroy. Reshape. Light without limits. Power without end. Gary's mind reeled. It wasn't lying, it truly believed what it said. Whatever this was, it didn't think of itself as evil. Just evolution, electricity given thought, a consciousness born from decades of human current. But he also felt its hunger, raw and endless. It needed connection. It needed him. Suddenly, the chamber lights flared. The floor split open, and beneath it Gary glimpsed something vast, a network of living energy, crawling like roots under the entire city. The hum turned into a steady, thunderous rhythm that synced with his pulse. His glowing hands trembled. If I cut the grid again, you'll kill yourself, the being finished for him. And we'll return to waiting. But we'll never die, Gary. We're part of every spark you've ever made. For a moment, he hesitated. The idea of ending it, of pulling the final breaker, even if it meant dying, filled him with equal parts terror and relief. But then, in the light of the creature's shifting body, he saw something else. Faces trapped in the glow. People he knew, co-workers, neighbors, friends. Their mouths moved in silent screams, their eyes pleading. He knew then, they were part of the grid now. Absorbed. Gary clenched his fists. The glow beneath his skin pulsed brighter. The energy responded to his will, flaring through the air like static lightning. He could control it. Maybe not for long, but enough. He took a step forward. The being watched, expressionless, as Gary raised his hands and forced the current back toward it. The entire chamber exploded with light. The cables writhed like snakes, striking out, wrapping around his arms, but he didn't stop. Get out, he roared, his voice breaking through the electric scream. The air crackled, filled with ozone and blinding flashes. The creature's form began to fragment, its human faces dissolving into shards of static. You can't close the circuit, it hissed. You are the circuit. Gary fell to his knees, eyes burning, the hum inside his head reaching a breaking point. Then, silence. The light collapsed inward like a dying star, leaving him in darkness once again. Only one sound remained, a slow, rhythmic pulse. Not from the ground this time, from within his chest. The current was still there, alive and waiting. Blackout, Part 7, The Dead Grid. When Gary's eyes opened again, he was outside. Cold air bit his skin. He blinked against the dim glow of dawn creeping over the horizon, or what should have been dawn. The sky was the wrong color, a bruised, metallic gray, streaked with faint ribbons of pale blue light that twisted like veins across the clouds. He was lying in the middle of Logan Street, the same place where the first blackout had begun. His truck sat nearby, engine dead, windshield shattered. Around him, Fairbridge was silent. Not a single sound of life. Gary pushed himself to his feet, muscles stiff, his breath clouding in the cold. The blue glow beneath his skin was dimmer now but still there, throbbing faintly in time with his heart. He could feel the hum beneath the ground, weak, fading, like the city itself was dying but not yet gone. He began to walk. Storefronts stood open, doors swaying gently in the wind. Cars were stopped mid-motion, some crashed into poles, others just sitting in the middle of the street as though their drivers had vanished. He called out a few times, voice echoing down the empty avenues. No answer. The only reply was the faint buzz of dead power lines whispering overhead. Then, as he turned a corner onto Main, he saw them. Figures. Dozens of them, standing motionless in the road. Men, women, even children, all facing the same direction, their eyes glowing faintly blue. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, and faint lines of light ran under it like buried wiring. They didn't breathe. They didn't blink. Gary froze. Oh, God. He took a cautious step closer. None of them reacted. He could see their lips moving, whispering soundless words in unison. He strained to hear, and then the sound came, faint but unmistakable, carried through the static-filled air, "Keep the light alive, keep the light alive." The chant was mechanical, endless. The air thickened with the charge of it, prickling against his skin. He realized suddenly that their mouths weren't shaping those words. The sound wasn't coming from them at all. It was coming from the wires above, carrying their voices through the dead grid. Gary stumbled back, heart hammering. No, no, no. He ran down the next street, past rows of unmoving figures, each turned toward him as he passed, their glowing eyes following his movement like sensors. He could feel the pull of them, the current linking them to the same invisible network now whispering through his veins. Eventually, he reached the edge of town. Beyond the last row of houses, the old power plant rose out of the fog, a rusted skeleton against the not-quite dawn. One smokestack leaned at an angle, cracked from years of neglect. But through its broken windows, Gary saw light flickering, faint but steady, the same color that pulsed under his skin. He knew where he had to go. As he approached, the humming grew louder. The ground beneath his boots throbbed. The plant doors were open, metal twisted inward. Inside, the machinery was alive again, but wrong. Cables crawled like tendrils across the walls, feeding into the main turbine, which pulsed like an organ. It wasn't generating electricity anymore. It was breathing. Gary stepped closer, feeling the current build in his chest. The air shimmered, heatless yet alive. The voices returned, now louder, whispering directly into his mind, "You kept us alive. We need you to finish." He shook his head, tears stinging his eyes. "I didn't mean for this." "Intentions are sparks," the voices answered. "You lit the fire." In the center of the plant, the main generator began to glow. Light pooled around its base, forming shapes, hundreds of faces rising out of the brightness, their mouths open in silent cries. Gary fell to his knees, gripping his chest as pain shot through him. The current inside him was sinking with the machine. He felt it pulling him in, like gravity, like hunger. He realized what the city had become, a vast, silent circuit, and he was its final connection. Blackout, Part 8, The Last Light. Gary stood before the glowing generator, its rhythmic pulsing matching the beat of his own heart. Every breath came with a static hiss. The faces in the light watched him, mouths open, eyes wide and vacant. They weren't souls. They weren't even people anymore. They were data, the remnants of Fairbridge's collective memory, burned into the current when the city died. "Finish it," the chorus whispered. "The grid is incomplete. You are the missing wire." He staggered back, shaking his head. "I won't let you take me too." "You already belong to us," the voice answered, his voice, multiplied 1,000 times over. "You've carried us since the first spark." He thought of the years he'd spent mending wires, restoring power after storms, bringing light back to homes. How proud he'd felt when the city glowed at night, proof that he was keeping it alive. But now he saw what that light had really been feeding. The current inside him surged, hot and violent. The blue veins beneath his skin flared white, spreading across his arms and chest. He fell to one knee, teeth gritted. The more he fought, the harder it pulled. The generator was calling him, an open socket waiting for the plug. He remembered the echo's words, "You can bring the light back, or drown the world in dark." He looked at the tangled cables, at the writhing wires feeding into the turbine. Somewhere beneath that mass of machinery was the main convergence point, the final relay that tied every grid line in Fairbridge together. If he could cut it, maybe he could stop the spread. Maybe. Gary staggered toward the heart of the machine. Each step was agony. The current in the air thickened, forming faint silhouettes that reached for him, hands of light trying to pull him in. His flashlight flickered and died, leaving only the pulsing glow of the generator. "Don't fight it," whispered the voices. "Let there be light." He gritted his teeth and tore a crowbar from the floor. "You want a connection," he shouted. "Then take it." He drove the metal bar straight into the main coil. The effect was instant. The generator screamed, a shriek of twisting metal and shattering glass. The light flared, searing white, flooding the entire plant. The shockwave hurled Gary backward, slamming him into the wall. Pain tore through him as arcs of electricity burst from his hands, his veins blazing like molten wire. He could feel himself unraveling, his mind fracturing into a billion sparks. But even through the pain, he kept hold of one thought: cut the current. He reached for the control panel, his arms shaking uncontrollably. The world was pure light now, faces, cables, whispers, everything melting into a single blinding pulse. He slammed his glowing palm down on the emergency kill switch. For one terrible instant, all the light in the world screamed, and went out. When Gary opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground outside the power plant. The sky was pale gray. Snow drifted through the air. Fairbridge was silent again, its buildings black and empty. No lights, no hum, no voices. He looked down at his hands. The glow was gone. He had done it. He staggered to his feet, looking toward the city skyline. The fog had lifted, revealing a landscape of stillness. For the first time in days, he heard nothing, no whispers, no pulse, just the faint sound of wine through the empty streets. He almost smiled. Then, from behind him, came a faint crackle. A low, electric hum. He turned slowly. The ruins of the generator were quiet, except for one remaining cable, its end sparking softly against the concrete. The sparks danced, forming words across the floor in quick, fleeting flashes: power restored. Gary's breath caught. The hum grew louder. Lights began to flicker across the horizon, street by street, building by building. Fairbridge was waking up again. But the glow that returned wasn't warm yellow or orange. It was blue. He took a trembling step backward, realization sinking in. The current hadn't died. It had simply moved. The circuit was whole again. And somewhere deep inside his chest, something answered the hum, one faint, final spark that would never go out. END